Hi friends, it's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I have a fun watercolor marker quick tip video today using my Just a Little stamp set with Gina K Designs. I've been getting a lot of questions about watercolor markers and how to get these really juicy smoothie blend watercolor effects on your paper crafting projects. So I wanted to focus today on a technique, an embossing technique using the watercolor markers and Bristol paper. So I have two brands of Bristol paper here. This is Fabriano, and I also have a Strathmore Bristol. And the key to this technique is that the paper is super, super smooth, and we're not using a lot of water, but we can get some really super smooth watercolory wash effects with the Bristol paper. So these are just two brands that I like. They have a smooth, smooth finish, and they're really great for your paper crafting projects, and they work really well for the embossing technique that we're going to do today, that I'm going to share with you today. So I'm just going to go ahead and ink up the Just a Little stamp set, the main image from the stamp set, with some Versamark here, and just get it nice and juicy, and go ahead and apply that down to a piece of Bristol paper that I have cut to an A2 size for an A2 size card. So that's 4¼ by 5½. And the Bristol is really super, super white and smooth. So love it, love it, love it. So I'm going to go ahead and just stamp this down and just kind of position it up in the upper right hand corner here and just get a nice easy impression. Now you could use your MISTI for this as well, but I just went ahead and freehand it. So I'm dipping the whole card into my Gina K black onyx embossing powder. And yes, some of the embossing powder is getting in places I don't want it to, but that's okay. I'll be able to wipe it off with a brush. So I'm going to go ahead and get my heat tool out and emboss the whole image. And I'm loving that I've got a little bit of extra here and there, and I think it'll just add to the texture of the whole project. So the embossing powder is really going to help give me the wells for doing the watercolor work. Okay, so I have a couple different brands of water-based markers that I'm going to use on this project, and I'll talk about them along the way. I also have a Uni-ball Signo white gel pen here and a Posca pen because I'm going to add some whimsical little effects at the end. But let's talk about the watercolor markers. So I have the Arteza brand. I have the clean color from the Zig, the real brush pens. I also have a couple Tombow markers here to use with this Bristol paper. Now, because the Bristol paper is super smooth, it really, really takes on water-based media pretty well with your ability to move it around. So the key to this technique is using a water brush and not using a ton of water, because it isn't a watercolor paper, but it will allow you to move the water-based media around to get these smoothie effects, like these watercolor effects that we're trying to achieve. So I'm going in here with the pink Zig Clean Color brush, and I'm just adding a little bit of color to the petals. And you notice that I'm not coloring in the entire petal. I'm only adding a little bit of color. And now I'm not squeezing the water brush, but I am just letting the water distribute from the brush, and it's helping me to pull the water-based media from the marker out to the edge of the petal. Now the paper is not getting overly saturated, and because the Bristol paper is super smooth, the little tiny bit of water that's coming from the brush is allowing me to move the water-based media from the watercolor marker out to the edges. You can see that I've got a little bit of that color on the tip, and I'm just using it to blend it out to the edge. So you can get these really beautiful smoothie watercolor effects on this paper without it being watercolor paper. Okay, and the paper's not pilling up. So now I'm just grabbing the Arteza brand and just kind of showing you how it works well with that one as well. So this is just another pink marker from the Arteza brand, and I'm just going into some of the petals and adding a little bit of that color in around the petals. And you can see I'm not coloring in the entire petal the same way I did with the other pink, and I'm just using a little bit of water to push it out to the outer edges and just making that water-based media move to the edges. So I'm getting these smoothie watercolor effects without applying a ton of water and needing to use watercolor paper. Now you could do this technique on watercolor paper, but if you want a more controlled kind of look and feel, using this Bristol paper, this super smooth paper, can really make it happen for you. So now I'm just noodling around with some of the colors and just kind of spreading the two, that peachy pink and that really bright pink, together. I'm going to go ahead and move on to just adding a little bit of color in here to the leaves and the greenery that are part of the stamp. And I'm just going to do the same technique that I did with the flowers. Just gently push that color out to the edge so you get that gradation of light and dark. So, and it gives you that watercolor effect without a lot of water. So now I'm just going to use the Arteza brand of the watercolor marker and just add in a little bit of a darker color just to get a little bit more shadow in that center portion. You can see I'm just kind of moving that out a little bit to the outer edge of the leaf. So I'm getting these super smoothie effects with a watercolor look and feel with these watercolor markers. Okay, so I've taken the blue marker and I'm adding a little bit of the pink, and I'm using the Ziggs clean color brushes and mixing them together, mixing the two colors together to get this purple violet like tone. And I'm using it with the brush pen, the water brush, and just using it as a watercolor paint. And I'm not squeezing the water brush. I'm just using the little bit of the water that's coming out of the brush to push that violet color around. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the background and just kind of show you with this blue Zig Clean Color brush. I'm going to add a little bit of blue into the background of the card around the stamped edges. So you can see that I'm going in and just kind of pushing that water-based media around. I'm not pushing on the water brush, but I'm just letting the little tiny bit of water that comes out naturally work with the water-based ink from the watercolor marker and just nesting it down in and around the background of the stamped embossed image. And what this really does is it helps create a little bit of foreground and background, so you get a little bit more of a 3D look. You can see that I'm just playing around with adding a little bit of violet and getting some shadow areas here, and just using these watercolor markers as a really, really nice watercolor medium on this Bristol paper. And the Bristol paper is not pilling because I'm not adding a lot of water. So if you were going to use watercolor paper to do this technique, you would really need to get it saturated. But using this Bristol paper here, you can see that we've got some really, really nice watercolor effects and that smoothie blending look with this technique. So now I'm just going in and adding in a little bit of contrast. Some of the colors in the petals got a little flat, so I'm just going in and adding a little bit of contrast, meaning adding a little bit of a darker color to the center portion of the petals, and then just kind of letting it feather blend out to the outer edges. So this is a really great controlled way to use a water-based medium to get super duper watercolor effects. So watch as I'm adding this green, this darker green texture, darker green color, excuse me, into the leaf here, and just giving that center portion of the leaf a little bit more contrast. So with this technique, you can also do quite a bit of layering. So we've done 2 different layers of colors now in the flowers and 2 different layers of color in the background. And we get that really, really nice watercolor effect. And this is just such a super simple technique. And I've get a lot of questions about using watercolor mediums on regular cardstock. So this is one way that you can do that technique, get those watercolor effects, and use Bristol paper on your paper crafting projects to get this kind of look and feel. Okay, so I've grabbed a Tombow here and I'm applying a little bit of that Tombow color to my mat here, and I'm going in with this color as a finishing color over top of my florals. So this is really going to add a lot more luminosity to the colors that are already there. So you could do, this is a little bit of a light orange marker. I like to do this with a yellow because whenever you add yellow to a pink flower or a red flower, it kind of jacks up that luminosity and brightens the whole project. So doing this with the orange and just kind of dropping in a little bit of color on the petals just kind of gives it this little extra oomph of luminosity in the whole project. So I've went ahead and added the sentiment thinking of you and put the whole card together. If you're interested in the full tutorial for this card, I will have that linked up here in the notes. I hope you enjoyed today's watercolor quick tip. Thanks so much for joining me. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.